Okay, I'd like to welcome you to session 2.1b, the first session of the second day of Fox. And our first talk is Decremental Single Source Reachability and Strongly Connected Components in O of M square root of n total update time. And this is by Sherry Chechik, Thomas Hansen, Pino Italiano, Jakob, let's see if I can get all of these. Lackey, Nikos Parodidis, and Sherry's going to give the talk.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for doing the hard part for me. Okay, so let me start with the basic definitions. Let me remind you what strongly connected components are. So we are given a graph, and we say that a set of vertices is strongly connected if for every two vertices in this set, we can reach from one another. And our goal is to compute maximal strongly connected components. Maximal in the sense that the component is strongly connected, and I cannot add more nodes to this set such that it remains strongly connected. So in the static case, we can compute the maximal strongly connected components in linear time. And in this paper, we care about the dynamic setting, where the graph changes over time, or more specifically in the decremental setting, where there is some adversary that keeps deleting edges from the graph until the graph remains empty, and I need to compute the strongly connected components at all times. So in other words, I want to maintain some data structure. By the way, all the nice pictures are by Nikos, so thank you. I want to maintain a data structure that can handle some adversary online sequence of update and query operations. In each update operation, the adversary picks an edge to delete. And in each query operation, we say get two vertices, and we need to tell if they are still strongly connected or not. Okay, so and related problem to that is the single source reachability, where we are also given a source, and we want to maintain all vertices that are reachable from that source. And it turns out that these two problems, at least in the decremental setting, are very related. There are reductions both ways. In one way, we lose log n. Okay, so let me tell you what is already known about this problem. So a naive approach would be to just recompute both of them from scratch after every update, after every deletion. Right? We know how to do that in linear time. And here all the times are the total update time. So in the decremental setting, we often use the aggregate sum of all update times over all deletions, which is the total update time. So in the decremental, we have at most m deletions. So in each deletion we spend m times, the total update time is m squared. And the first non-trivial solution was given in 81 in a seminal work by Evan and Shiloach, who showed that we can actually do that in mn time. What they showed is actually something more general. They showed that that was for the single source reachability. So they showed something more general. They showed that you can actually maintain the single source shortest path in mn time. Or more specifically, if the diameter is delta, then you can do, or if you care only about distances up to delta, then you can do that in m delta time. Okay, and Italiano later showed that actually if the graph is acyclic, then the problem of single source reachability becomes easy. You can do that in linear time. Later, Roditi and Zwick showed a reduction from SCCs, so strongly connected components, to SSR. So they also show that the SEC can be solved in mn time. That construction was randomized. Watsky later showed a deterministic construction. But basically, up until recently, for a very long time, it was not known if we can beat the mn. So at least for the single source reachability, the Evan and Shiloach stood for a very long time. And people started to ask, maybe mn is the right bound, maybe we can find some lower bounds, until that very recently, Ezinger et al. Shows that no, you can actually beat the mn, and they managed to shave the bit from the n. They later improve their bounds to mn to the 0.9. And in this work, we show a much cleaner bound of m square root n. And the construction is, I also think it's simple. Okay, and in our construction, we use 3 of these results as ingredients. The first is the Even and Shiloach. The second is the Italiano for acyclic graph. And the third is the Watsky algorithm. And the first 2 we use as black box. The last one, I need to tell you some details about it in order to understand our result. So that's what we'll do next. Okay, so what's the idea in his construction? So we want to do something like divide and conquer. We want to solve a simpler problem by delegating some of the work to others. So basically say that we have some component or graph G that at the moment is strongly connected, and we want to know if it still remains strongly connected. So notice that if I'll pick any vertex R from this set, then all nodes should be reachable from R and to R, and as long as this is the case, this component is still strongly connected. So we pick an arbitrary R, we remove it from the current graph, and we compute strongly connected components in the graph without this vertex, in G minus R. Now, so this is the strongly connected components in G minus R. So then we'll just do recursively on each of these components. So say that someone else now takes care of telling me when these strongly connected components are not anymore strongly connected. And all I need to do is just to say when my big component with R is not strongly connected anymore. So this is the strongly connected components in G minus R. We now take R and we split it into 2 vertices, R in and R out. All edges going out of R will now go out of R in. All edges coming out from R, coming into R, will now come in to R out. And notice that as long as these strongly connected components remain strongly connected, I don't really care what's happening inside. So I can just contract them into single vertices. Okay, so now I constructed this nice graph, and this nice graph has a very nice property. The nice property is that it is acyclic. Okay, so clearly Ri and R out cannot be in any cycles, and we can also cannot have any cycles here, because otherwise this entire cycle should have been strongly connected, right? And we already computed the maximal strongly connected. So now, in order to know if this entire thing is strongly connected, all I need to do is to maintain reachability from R in and to R out, and I know if this entire thing is strongly connected. And since this graph is acyclic, it's very easy to do in linear time. Okay, and now we take each of these strongly connected and we do the same thing recursively to it. So let's just see an example. So if this is our graph, we pick an arbitrary node, say D. We remove it, compute the strongly connected components without that node, split it into Di in and D out, and then continue recursively on each of the strongly connected components. Okay, so each of them we pick other vertices, split them, compute the strongly connected components without them, and so on. Okay, and we continue doing that recursively until we get some kind of decomposition. The leaves in this decomposition are just single vertices. So this decomposition is for one strongly connected component. If I have multiple of them, I'll have such a decomposition for each strongly connected component. And to answer queries, I now just, if I get 2 vertices, I just go to the root and I check if they both belong to the same root. If so, they are strongly connected, otherwise they are not. And now we need to maintain that. So how do we maintain that? So roughly speaking, if now we get a deletion of an edge x, y. So which of the nodes here might be affected from the deletion? The first node that might be affected is the least common ancestor of x and y. We go there, and we try to we delete the edge from there, and we check using our reachability for acyclic graphs if all the vertices in the graph of that node are still reachable from the vertex that we picked, and to the vertex, if it still remains, or in other words, I want to know if it's still strongly connected. If so, then I don't need to do anything. I don't need to propagate. My parent is not affected by that, and I don't need to propagate anything further, and I'm done. Otherwise, the strongly connected component might break into few strongly connected components, and I kind of need to reattach them to the parent. And that's propagate maybe up to the root. Okay, so you can see here that we actually might pay the depth of this decomposition, because I might need to propagate my information all the way out to the root. And a more careful analysis than what I described shows that what we pay here is m, the number of edges, times the depth of the root. Okay, so this gives us a clear motivation to try to bound the depth of this decomposition better. Okay, so if I was very lucky and I managed to pick, maybe I shouldn't like pick the nodes in an arbitrary order. Maybe I should pick them more carefully. So if I was lucky and I managed to pick the first node, and the remaining strongly connected components without that node shrank by much more, and if that happens many times, then I'll be able to bound my depths better, and I'll get a better bound. Okay, but that might not be possible, because maybe the entire graph is a clique. So if I'll remove one vertex, the remaining stuff is still strongly connected, and no matter which vertex I'll remove, it will remain like that, and the depth will be still n. Okay, so that's not useful by itself. But what we can do is, so basically what I want to delete a vertex such that the remaining strongly connected components their size shrank by a lot. And it not necessarily has to be one vertex. It could be a set of vertices. But if I delete k vertices, I want that the remaining strongly connected components will shrink by much more than k. Okay, I'll delete the k vertices one by one, but if I deleted only k and I got rid of much more than k vertices, then I'll be able to bound the depths better. And another thing that we use is that we don't really need to construct this decomposition up front. I can be lazy. I can decide on the fly if I want to construct, if I want to continue recursively constructing this decomposition or not. And how I'm going to decide that is if I can find such a good set, we call it a good separator. If I can find a good separator that if I delete it, my components shrink by a lot, then I'll continue recursively. Otherwise, I'll wait. So of course, I need to do something else because I still need to answer queries. So basically how we distinguish between these two cases is according to the diameter. If the diameter is large, then we show that we can always find a good separator. And in that case, we'll continue building this decomposition recursively. Otherwise, if the diameter is small, then there is already the known techniques already know how to do it better. So basically what we need to do in each node, according to what I described earlier, is to do a single source reachability. And if we just do this decomposition upfront, then in each node the graph is acyclic and I can do that better. Now if I don't want to do it upfront, that maybe the leaves, the graphs in the leaves are not acyclic. But then I can use Even and Shiloach for smaller depths. And Even and Shiloach already give good bounds for low diameter. Right? It gives m times the diameter. Okay, so this is how we're going to distinguish between these two cases. If the diameter is small, I will just wait and do Even and Shiloach. If the diameter is large, I will find a good separator, and I'll continue recursively until my diameter is small. Okay, so that's really the main idea. Okay, so these are the two cases, small diameter and big diameter. And why do we have a good separator when the diameter is large? So say the diameter is, how much time do I have? 5. Okay, so if the diameter, say the diameter is large, in the way we balance the parameters is square root n. So if the diameter is square root n, then no matter which node I'll pick, the shortest path tree, the depth, either the incoming or the outcoming, should be of roughly square root n. Okay, so I can pick a node R. Its shortest path tree should be of depth roughly square root n. And notice that each level in this tree is actually a separator, in the sense that if I'll delete this entire level, then I cannot have strongly connected components with one vertex from the upper part and one vertex from the lower part, right? Because I cannot have edges. I cannot have jumping edges from a level here to a non-consecutive level here, right? So each such level is actually a separator. And now, because the diameter is large, I have many separators to pick from, and kind of by the pigeonhole principle, one of them should be good, should be relatively small according to both the upper part and the lower part. Okay, so the proof is slightly more technical than that, but only slightly. Okay, so if the diameter is large, we can always find a good separator. Okay, so just to combine the things, so what do we do? So we start by constructing this decomposition, but now in each leaf, if I found out that the diameter is small, then I'll just do Even and Shiloh in each one of these leaves, incoming and outcoming. And by small, for us, it's square root n. And if, again, if the diameter is large, then I'll just continue recursively on that node. But this is not enough. So why this is not enough? So what we can show is that the depth, if we do that like that, the depth of our decomposition is square root n. But now, because my graphs here are not acyclic, I don't spend linear time in each such node. Right? I spend doing Even and Shiloh up to diameter square root n, which takes me m square root n time. So if the depth is square root n, and on each leaf I spend, on each node in this decomposition, I'll spend m square root n time, I'm back to square root 1, and I'm paying now mn, which is too much. But here we use randomization. So here is why the randomization helps. So when we pick the nodes here, we pick them uniformly at random. And now I'm going to use the fact that I picked them at random. So basically what we show, we indeed pay m square root n on each Even and Shiloh. We might pay m square root n in each Even and Shiloh that we construct. But what we show is the following. We show that if most of the nodes are still close to the root of the Even and Shiloh, then we can just continue reusing that Even and Shiloh, and I didn't waste anything. Otherwise, if most of the nodes are far away from the root of the Even and Shiloh, we can show that because this node was picked at random, then what happened to that node should have happened in expectation to half of the other nodes. And in that case, we show that we cannot just find one good separator. We can find many, many good separators, such that if I delete all of them, all the strongly connected components, or most of them, are of size at most a constant fraction of the original size. Okay, so all the strongly connected components shrink by half. And that can happen at most log n times. So I spent m square root n time. I wasted that. But that can happen only log n time. So that's why we'll pay in the end m square root n. Okay, so that's the ideas. So we get m square root n, total update time. And can we get all the way down to linear, to near linear, Or can we show a lower bound? Can we use the ideas here in other problems? Thank you. I think everything should. No, it's not. I will not. We don't know. Yeah. For the incremental case, yeah. How do I mean, I can just do, if I don't really need the diameter, I need approximation. So if I just do a shortest path tree, I get a good bound on the, good approximation on the diameter.